Hey, welcome everyone to today's special hybrid planning committee meeting. I'm Councillor Alan Hunter, chair of the planning committee. Just bear with us a sec, please. Okay, we'll start again. Welcome everybody to today's special hybrid planning committee meeting. I'm Councillor Alan Hunter, chair of the planning committee. In addition to committee members, we also have officers joining us to assist with our discussions, together with public speakers for some of the planning applications being considered, who will be introduced at the appropriate time. For those viewing the live stream recording, committee members are identified with their asterisks next to their name. Can I remind members that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I also remind members the translation facilities are available and to choose your language of choice if you're on Zoom. If you wish to speak, please use the raised hand function. You can also use the chat facility, but please note I may not be able to monitor the chat facility during the meeting. For those of you in the council chamber, if you wish to speak, okay, for those of you in the council chamber, if you wish to speak, okay, slight technical hitch there. So for those of you in the council chamber, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand and turn your microphone on. That'll be using the button at the bottom, not the usual green one. I'll try and make sure I can see everybody. Can I also take this opportunity to welcome our new member, Councillor Anthony Batola, and also just to inform members, our fellow member, Councillor Trevor Stott, is in hospital at the moment. So I'd like to record and send our best wishes for a speedy recovery. Moving on to the agenda, item 1, apologies for absence.
Just one apology, Councillor Trevor Stott.
Item 2, declaration of interest, the Code of Local Government Conduct. Members are reminded that they must declare the existence and nature of their declared personal interests. Can't see any hands up, so Councillor Joe.
I'm on the ethics committee there.
Okay, thank you. Noted. Nobody else? Okay, thank you. Item 3, urgent matters. I'm not aware of any.
There are no urgent matters, Chair.
Okay. Okay, item 4 is the deferred applications from previous committee meetings. Code reference 049443 is proposed new dwelling and forming of new access at plot 4 Kevin Bahrain in Conway, LL16 5EB. That was pages 6 to 17 of your packs, and it was one of our site visits earlier in the week. I'll now hand over to the planning officer at this point, which is Mr. Kerry Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. There is nothing to report from the addendum.
Okay, thank you. So members will remember this was originally back in April, the committee then went against the officer's recommendation to allow this one. Since then, we've decided to go for a site visit. So members will be aware that we went for the site visit, and we'd also gone against the officer's recommendation. That's why it's come back to us. So I will open it to the floor. If anyone has any comments on this one. Councillor Nigel Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So I was looking at the comments on page 7, and the first dot says that the Community Council would like to emphasise that there is no objection to this application, as the applicant has been raised in the local area, speaks Welsh, and seeks to return to the community where she was born and raised. And those are the reasons why I supported this application back in April. Since then, we've obviously had the luxury of a site visit, which I found most informative, I must say. And one of the things I noted about the 3 Section 106 properties on the adjacent to the site is that they all had an extra floor. So basically, they had 2 sets of staircases. And I'm mindful of the fact that those additional rooms in the loft area would probably equate to the same square footage or square meterage of rooms in the proposed property. To also add to that, I was reading, and I just can't quite find it in here, but it gives you the measurements of the property, which was, if I could find it, I think it was 15 meters wide, the property, including a car porch or carport. Well, a carport has to be in excess of 3 meters wide. So I don't think the actual overall width of the property, the internal meterage of the rooms, will be any greater than the properties that we've seen on the adjacent to the site. So for those reasons, along with the fact that I firmly believe that allowing this property will help support the Welsh language, the culture, and sustain the village. So for those reasons, I wish to propose that we reaffirm the decision of the members back in April. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nigel. Councillor Tristram.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm not going to speak much. All I'm going to draw attention of my colleagues, the fact that officers have recommended to refuse this application originally, and there's no change in that. It sets dangerous spaces and the question of affordable homes in the countryside. I know, as I've mentioned already, that this committee has gone against the recommendation of officers in a few cases in Pentref, but the truth is, in Llanefydd and in Llansannan and in many areas in my ward, young people are screaming for affordable homes. And the danger with a market home like this is for it to be sold. I don't know what the intentions of this person is, and I have no right to know that. But the danger is that a house of this size will go on the open market, of course, and there'll be no kind of opportunity for young people to have their foot on the ladder. I can name to you 10, 12 young families where there are no houses for them. And approving this afternoon sets dangerous spaces for market homes to come to the countryside rather than offering homes for native Welsh-speaking families in our areas. It sets a dangerous basis. The officers here to all purpose, they know, of course, we have every right as councillors to scrutinise and to question. But in this case, I strongly believe that the officers are making the right choice. So I'm going to propose that we're going with the original recommendation, that we object this recommendation, going for the original, that the objection of this house of this size, and then closing our young people out of the markets in the countryside.
Okay, thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Any other members wishing to speak? Councillor Andrew?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much. Please note, I'm a new member of this committee. I've sought advice off two officers today, slightly in not in contradiction of each other, but this, as Tristan says, I'm not totally for people moving back into the area, supporting the Welsh language, born and bred up there, 100%. But this house seems to be too large. It is not under the affordable. It goes against housing policy. And that sort of forms a quandary for a new member. Where do I go from there? At what point do I adopt housing policy? And what point do I actually go with the actual local housing needs of people? So, you know, I don't know if there's any more further advice I could be given, but I thank the officers for speaking to me this morning. And I shall go there. The only thing somebody has suggested, an officer has suggested, that we could go with a recommendation that it is brought back as a smaller property within the affordable Section 106 criteria. Now, I need to take further advice off planning people. If you can advise me on that, maybe it is a immediate situation which satisfies everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wood. Kerry, can you come back in on there, please?
The application is specifically for a market dwelling, and the applicant has said that her income levels are marginally above what could be eligible for consideration as an affordable dwelling. So we have to work on the basis that the applicant's own declaration is that she wouldn't be available, she wouldn't be eligible for an affordable dwelling. Of course, it's possible that, you know, people's income levels do change, and it's possible that she may be at some time in future. But at the time the application was submitted, she declared that she was not eligible for an affordable dwelling. So I think while the possibility of a resubmission is still open to her, she would still need to pass the test. Now, the organisation that determines whether a person is or is not in need of an affordable dwelling, we don't do it in-house anymore. It's done by Tai Teg, which are part of Carnarvon Housing Association. So they will assess whether she's in need of affordable dwelling. But the information we have at present is that she is not in need of an affordable dwelling. So we wouldn't be able to treat a future application unless, of course, the circumstances change. In terms of the size of the dwelling, I have made a comparison between the sizes of the dwellings that have already been built in terms of floor space, and they vary between 131 square meters and 162 square meters. The application that's before us is for 204 square meters, and that doesn't include the carport area. So it is a larger dwelling. Appreciate it doesn't come as high, but it is a larger dwelling in terms of footprints than the three that have already been built. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kerry. Can I bring Councillor Nigel Smith had his hand up, and then I can bring in Councillor Wood if he wants to respond.
During the site visit, there was an interesting conversation that Kerry had about Section 106 and the issue that residents or prospective buyers have raising mortgages on properties that are Section 106. Could you enlighten the committee to that fact, please, Kerry?
Thanks, Kerry.
I'm not in a position to advise whether the existing affordable dwellings are subject to mortgages. I don't know whether they were bought with or without a mortgage.
I think the conversation was on the lines that was going around the committee members was that if it's a Section 106 property, you can't raise a normal mortgage on it. So it puts it further out of the reach of those young families wishing to get on the mortgage or on the housing ladder. I think that's what the conversation was suggesting that I was listening to, which I thought was quite surprising, really, because the whole point of an affordable property is that they are accessible, you would imagine, to those people starting out in their family lives. But if mortgage companies don't wish to mortgage those properties, then you're hindering people. And that's part of the problem with our local LDP plan, is that it hasn't, that what we put in there 7 or 8 years ago into the LDP, thinking that it might assist the rural areas, hasn't proven to do that. And I've spent 10 years on this planning committee, and it's changed my mind, the amount of people that we've refused properties to, who want to stay within the community where they've been born and brought up. Schools are closing and they want to raise their family there. And we've turned those families down in the past, those applications that those families have put in. But I won't be doing it this time, because I know that our LDP is failing our rural communities. It's failing the Welsh language. It's failing our rural communities. And I think for those reasons, as did my members back, the members of the committee here back in April, thought that this application should be approved. So that's where I am. But thank you, Kerry.
Thanks, Councillor Nigel. Councillor Andrew Wood, did you want to come back after?
Yeah, just briefly, thanks to Kerry and thanks to Paula today. I spoke to both of them, not because I didn't believe either of them. I just wanted a bit of advice off them. It just seems a bit confusing to me, but I'm a little bit clearer thanks to Kerry and Paula. I did touch on the subject of restrictions, but they seem to have been in the past been challenged by inspectors. So you would actually sort of decree that this property can only be sold as a property for local people to buy for a certain amount of time, just to tie it down a little bit. But apparently that isn't possible. So if it's not possible, I'd look at, as a not a recommendation, but a suggestion that we just need to look at this in the RDLP from a planning point of view. But again, I'll take any other steer on that. Kerry did go say that they'd done it once before and it had been challenged, but it's probably done more than once before. So it may be assure members that this local property doesn't get just developed, sold on the open market and moved on. Thank you.
Kerry, before I bring everyone else in, are you able to respond to that? Whether we can or can't? Okay.
Yeah, there were a few agreements which were issued prior to the adoption of the LDP. They were basically issued at the time of the Colwyn Borough local plan, which restricted market dwellings to local occupancy within a specified radius. The problem with that type of agreement, well, there's two things. Firstly, you need to have an applicant who's willing to enter Section 106 agreement. We can't force them to enter into Section 106 agreement if they're not willing to do so. But secondly, after a period of 5 years, an owner has the opportunity to ask for the Section 106 agreement to be lifted. And if the council refuses to lift it, then they then have the right to appeal. And we had, there's at least one appeal situation I'm aware of, there possibly more, but the one I'm thinking of was one in Tynant along the A5 a number of years back, where the inspector determined that the agreement, local occupancy agreement, no longer served a useful purpose, and he lifted the restriction. And following that decision, we received a number of applications to remove Section 106 agreements on similar properties. So I would be very cautious against granting planning permission for a market dwelling with a local occupancy restriction.
Okay, thanks, Kerry. Before I bring in Councillor Evans, who's been waiting patiently, I think Councillor Tristan wants to come back as well. I'll just bring in our legal officer, Ryn Apgarth.
On the local occupancy restriction, you don't have a policy framework for that type of agreement. So it wouldn't be really possible for you to ask the developer to enter into that type of agreement. You're absolutely right, Councillor Wood, in terms of if you want to follow that route, you need to change the policy. So we're not in that position at the moment. So I would really advise strongly against going down that route at the moment, because we couldn't sustain it in an appeal.
Okay, thank you, Ryn. Councillor Eva Lloyd, thanks you for your patience.
Thank you very much. Questions going.
I've got a question for Kerry. What is the size of an affordable house? 140 metre square under the guidelines.
Beth mae'r SPG yn dweud ydy.
What the SPG says is for an affordable home, an affordable private house goes up to DQR standard at 20%. And what we've said in this case, the biggest house you could get under DQR for the biggest family, we don't know how many people live in the house, but if we had the biggest family they account for, and at 20%, it's a total of 137 square meters. Right, so this is 30% more than what would be allowed in the open land normally. Is that right? Similar. Right, this is shouting size and scale, and the base is set. We do have guidelines in place. That's what the LDP is. I do know there are companies out there, mortgage companies. If the candidate spoke to someone like James Harland, he could point them in the right direction, where these companies can fund affordable homes through a mortgage. As a result of that, I do feel there are other options to resubmit and ask the question again with something that satisfies everyone, in particular the LDP. Therefore, I feel I cannot support this as based on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Eva Lloyd. Councillor Tristan, and then Councillor Joe.
Thank you for letting me to speak again. I just wanted to add one thing to the spiel of Councillor Smith, saying that the Community Council is happy that there is a development, but they're very concerned at the size of the development. So whilst the Community Council supports the development, they're not supporting this particular development because of its size, and they're responding to the local cry. There is quite local opposition to this, and of course, as a county council, I'm a voice against that locally. Of course, they're welcoming someone returning to the community and the Welsh language, but it's the size of the development that's a concern locally, and I hope I'm a voice for that. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tristan. Councillor Joan Nuttall, please.
As a new member, just after clarification really, if this property is built and it is larger and it doesn't have a 106 agreement attached to it, once the 5 years is up and the other 3 houses can then come out of their 106 agreement, can they then extend their properties? They make them larger properties, they're obviously more expensive properties, and it makes the whole area not affordable.
Kerry, can you come on, please?
That would depend on a number of circumstances. There are a lot of assumptions that are inherent in the question. once a Section 106 agreement is more than 5 years old, the applicant or anyone who's bound by the agreement can apply to have the agreement lifted or varied. But that's not an automatic process. They have to demonstrate that the agreement no longer serves a useful purpose. And since we have evidence that there is still a need for affordable housing in the community, we would argue that the agreement still, or the restrictions on those properties still serve a useful purpose. And according to the evidence we now have available, we don't feel that is a case for removing those restrictions. But it is right that we do consider what possible consequences granting planning permission for a market dwelling could have on the, shall we say, the expectations of those neighbouring property owners. In terms of whether they would be able to extend their properties, I can't remember whether permitted development rights have been removed from those properties. But the principle behind permitted development is that essentially permitted development rights can only be removed. Firstly, they can only be removed in exceptional circumstances. And secondly, where permitted development rights are removed by condition, it doesn't have the effect of saying there shall be no further development. All it means is that any further development is assessed on the basis of whether they should get planning permission. So it's removing permitted development rights is not a prohibition on development. It just brings it in within the fold of the planning process. Now, there have been, over the years, we have changed the way we secure affordable dwellings, the affordability of dwellings. Prior to the adoption of the SPG in 2017, the way the discount was calculated was based on the difference between the open market value and 3.5 times the median ward income. So what that meant was the larger the property, the bigger the discount. So having a larger property didn't preclude it from being an affordable dwelling. It simply meant that they could build a larger dwelling, but be subject to a larger discount. So essentially, if those properties were extended in future, it wouldn't necessarily preclude them from being affordable dwellings because they would be still be subject to the same discount mechanism by way that the affordable housing discount is calculated. So they would still essentially be affordable dwellings as defined in TAN 2.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. Councillor Nigel, did you want to come back in, and then we'll try and bring this to a conclusion? We've had lots of information and we've had 2 proposals.
I just want to clarification of Kerry on the size of the property, because on page 8 it says it's 13.3 meters in length and 15 meters in width, including a carport. So if a carport is 3.5 meters, say, in width, then the property is actually under 200 square meters, if I'm right. Not that I'm a mathematician, but.
If you just bear with us, Councillor Nigel, I think Kerry's just having a look and come back to you.
The way floor space is calculated, it's over both floors. So when we look at floor space, it's the ground floor plus the first floor, and if there's any attic accommodation, that's also included.
Okay. Well, I will go on to say that this property, I feel, won't look out of place. It's lower in height, and I think as we're all getting older, you wouldn't be going up 2 flights of stairs to go to bed at night. So I stand with my original decision, that is to propose that we can reaffirm the decision back in April.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nigel. What we don't have at the moment, we have a proposal from Councillor Nigel. Do we have anyone to second Councillor Nigel's proposal? Okay. Okay, we have a further proposal. It was made by Councillor Tristram that we go against the original committee decision and revert back to the officer's proposal which was, officer's recommendation is to not allow this to go ahead. But we need a seconder for that one as well. Would anyone like to second Councillor Tristram's proposal? Councillor Joe Nuttall is second. Okay, members, in that case, we go to the vote. We have a proposal from Councillor.
Can we just clarify that the original reasons for refusal by the officers of the members are aware of them? Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
So the recommendation is to refuse on the basis that the development does not, or the application does not comply with the affordable housing strategy in the LDP, including policy HOU 6, and that does include consideration of the size of the dwelling as part of the refusal reason.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. Everybody happy with that? Okay, we have the proposal you just heard from Councillor Tristram Lewis, which has been seconded by Councillor Joe Nuttall. So we'll go with a show of hands. All those in favour? Okay. Okay, thank you, members. That's carried. Anybody against? Can we call Councillor Nigel as against? And any abstentions? Yeah, 3 abstentions. Thank you. Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is code reference 049601 as construction of mobile building to provide 2 classrooms, lobby, toilet and a wet changing room, ramps and associated works, Conway Child Development Centre, Ysgolygogorth in Nantagama Road, Craigydon in Llandudno. That was pages 18 to 30 in your packs. And I will bring in the planning officer, which is Mr. Dave Watson.
Thank you, Chairman. As it says in the addendum, members, it was deferred at the June meeting to enable further assessment of the equality impact assessment. We had a revised version submitted, version 3. We've publicised the equality impact assessment, and we've also consulted the council's HR services manager, employment and equality. We haven't had any further comments received or representations, and we consider that the revised equality impact assessment is acceptable, and it would enable the council to comply with the duty in the Equality Act. So we're recommending that it's grant conditional planning permission for a temporary period of 3 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Watson. Okay, members, any comments? Councillor Austin.
Hello, Mr. Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Chairman. As we all know, Ysgolygogorth is a very special school. It's a unique resource for our county and is one of the few resources in North Wales. So I would like to approve and recommend that we pass this application.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Mandy.
I'd like to second the approval on what Councillor Austin said.
Councillor Eva Lloyd.
It's already been seconded, thank you.
Councillor Joe Nuttall.
Just reading on the notes here, it's going to be grey. Is there any way we can soften the outside of it?
Dave Watson.
Colour of it is something which is subject to approval. So I'm wondering what colour you would suggest instead, really.
Can we go for something in keeping with the area, whether it's wooden or a clad or?
Well, officers don't have any concerns with the material and the colour that's proposed, and a grey colour would would be generally, fairly subdued and would fit in and wouldn't stand out. There are alternative colours and things that would be acceptable as well, I'm sure, but I'm not. I don't have a particular strong view in favour of anything else instead. If you felt that there was a definite colour which you felt was a better colour, then you could.
I just think it's less industrial looking if it's not the metal finish, if it's a softer finish, that's all.
I think it's over to members, really. We could show you some photographs from the presentation that show the buildings. There aren't that many photographs, if that's possible, Julia.
Yeah, that'll help. That's happy for that.
So that slide there, number 11, it shows the existing play area, tarmac area, and it shows the fencing alongside it and the portable type buildings to the left-hand side and the main building at the back. So next slide, please. Okay, could you go to slide? Sorry, I'm looking at different ones to you. Yep, okay, if you just go through the slides. Right, and I think if we go to slide number 5. And it says on my drawing, I can enlarge it, it says it's an anthracite steel doors with white casings. So I would say to I'd ask you really what colour. It's got a black plinth on it as well. You might notice, and the fascia is an anthracite cladding system. So that's quite a darkish grey. It's a dark grey on the fascia and light grey on the middle and black on the bottom.
Back in, Joe, please.
Is there a photograph of the actual porta cabin?
No, we have these drawings. We could obtain one.
I've got no problem. I just would like it a softer finish, that's all.
Okay, thanks. Can I bring in Councillor Eva Lloyd, please?
Yeah, just to clarify, the backdrop of this is the Bodafon Fields, yeah?
It depends where you're looking at it from. If you're looking at it from Nantagama Road, it's set in front of the main building. I think that first photograph that we looked at, it was more or less looking at it from the west. It's probably from the north, from the southwest. And that would, so it has the backdrop of the main building. You can see that in that slide there. So that would be a view more or less from Nantagama Road. And we'll go to a different slide. We go to slide number 3. So that photograph would be looking at it from the bottom sort of left-hand side. And you've got answer to your question, we've got the backdrop of the main school building behind this, and you've got fencing in front of it at the moment.
The cladding on the main building, Dave, what colour would you call that?
I'm not sure the photograph's representative, but I think, as I recall, I can't remember. I don't know that it actually is that colour. That colour looks to me like a bluey grey.
Yeah. It's hard to, yeah, there you go. It's like a cornflower blue, is it?
Okay, before we go any further, can I bring in Bryn Gareth, who's our legal officer?
Yeah, I understand that the feelings in relation to the colour. I completely understand. The only thing I would say is colour needs to be in the context of the surroundings. So, you know, you've seen the surroundings of the building. So in the planning context, does it fit in as it looks? It's also a temporary structure, isn't it? You know, it'll only be there for 2 years. I guess in terms of what you can do, you can ask the officers, you can grant permission to the officers, but on the understanding that they discuss the colour with the developer as to the options available. And you can delegate that to officers, I guess. It's really difficult for us to say a specific colour here today, isn't it? Because the context is difficult for you. So I would suggest that you ask the officers to go away and have a discussion with the developer in terms of what's practical as well, because it's only a 2-year temporary permission, isn't it? So,
Councillor Andrew Wood.
Just a quick one. You mentioned 2 years, Britain. It says 3 years, and we know that things like this don't stay around for just 3 years, do we? They inherently stay. It just simply, can we not just adopt the colour that's on the building behind, which is, as David said, a blue grey, which is and it will blend into that presumably because it's in front of it. So, in keeping with the existing colour would be something that I would probably ask you to approve. So, and hopefully that Joe would be happy with that.
Can I come back I'm looking at a picture now from Google Maps, and it's the block that's immediately the backdrop is a sort of turquoisey colour, but the rest of the building is more of a light grey colour, or I would say. So the building that's immediately next to it isn't the predominant colour on the main building. I would have thought a colour that's the predominant colour on the main building would be the better colour to use,
Yeah.
and
So
that is a sort of grey colour.
So this extension in front of it is that you would want it the same colour as something behind, wouldn't you? And it is, as you rightfully said, a bluish grey. It's not grey, is it? But we can only be guided by, if we're going to do it in keeping, that's it, isn't it, really?
It's a modern design building overall, very block shape, isn't it? Lots of blocks, different sizes. The bit that's immediately the backdrop is not the same colour as the rest of the building. So my preference would be the colour of this mobile building is more or less the same colour as the main building, which is a greyer colour, which is pretty much what's shown in the drawings. Coming back to that point, so that I think that's the best colour personally. I think that and actually matches the main building.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I don't want to go around the houses with the colour. I think Bryn's made it a really good point that some of the officers can look at, but I don't think we need to carry on pursuing the colour of the building. For me, what's on the inside is what matters, but that's my own personal opinion. I'll bring in our planning buildings manager, Paula Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to expand on what Dave Watson has said. You know, I agree with what he said in terms of how the structure is going to look. I also think you need to be mindful that there is a bit of landscaping around there, so it will mitigate the impact anyway. If members obviously decide that they want to go with or for officers to look at a different colour or material on there, just to bear in mind, I think the build programme for the proposed mobile classroom, I think they're looking to start on site on the 20th of July. So obviously, if officers have to have any further discussions and perhaps go back out to consultation again, that may well delay the build programme, resulting in some of the works being carried out during school term time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Paula. I think that's a point very well made. So, Nigel, if there's just one last thing on this, because I really want to get this moved forward.
Yeah, it's. I mean, for me, it's always disappointing when they go for the cheap fix mobile classrooms. Having spent some time during my education in mobile classrooms, you always feel separate from the school, never feel part of it. I don't like the look of them. I don't think they're sustainable. I think they're cheap and tacky. But apart from that, let's move this ahead, because this is the application in front of us and there's no reason to turn it down. But I would hope that as an authority in the future, we would look at doing a proper fix instead of a temporary fix for the children of our communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nigel. Okay, we have a proposal from Councillor Austin. Roberts, that we go with the officer's recommendation, and that's been seconded by Councillor Mandy Hawkins. So can we have a show of hands? Those in favour? Okay, I think that's carried. Anyone against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Moving on, we got code reference 048633. It's a variation of condition number 1 of approval plans of planning approval 045161. Approval of matters reserved in respect of outline planning permission 042351 phase 1, land at Dolwyn Road, Old Colwyn, and that was in your packs pages 38 to 48. We do have a public speaker, Mr. Stuart Andrew, who's the applicant, who will be speaking in favour. If you'd like to come down, Mr. Andrew, you'll get 3 minutes and be told when you have approximately 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Stuart Andrew. I'm the Design and Planning Director of Castle Green Homes, the developer of this approved scheme off Dolwyn Road in Old Colwyn. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon in respect to this application to vary a planning condition. As is explained in the committee report, the submission being discussed this afternoon is not for the development as a whole, which already has planning permission. What is being brought to you today relates only to an amendment to the equipped play area within the development and the landscaping around that area. The play area on site has been built in a slightly different location to that which planning permission was granted. As you can see from the images on page 39 of your committee report, it has been moved a few metres south of its approved position. This was a decision made on site and was done to move the play area further away from existing dwellings. Also, the level of the play area has been adjusted to ensure the pathway running east to west past the area can be constructed at a gradient of no more than 1 in 12, as per the council's usual adoptable standards. This makes the play area accessible to bicycles, pushchairs, wheelchair users, and so on. Planning officers consider that this raising of the level of the play area was not approved previously. However, we wouldn't agree with this, as at no point during the previous planning application were the proposed levels of the play area requested from us. Had the play area been constructed at a lower level, then an accessible path would not have been possible, and the steps on the path, and there would have been steps on the path from the approved estate road, limiting the accessibility of the space. We obviously consider that it's a strong positive that a scheme as constructed is as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, and we consider that this is not something that should be objected to. We've also offered as part of this application, and in addition to the already approved landscaping, to plant an additional new hedge and 10 extra heavy standard oak and field maple trees to provide a better screen to existing dwellings of the play area itself. We're aware a limited number of existing residents have objected to these changes, despite the fact that, as I've already explained, it has actually been moved further away from existing properties and additional landscaping is being offered. Should this application be refused, then as a consequence, the play area would actually be required to be moved back to its original approved location, which is closer to neighbouring properties, and the additional landscaping screen to the area would no longer be possible. Perversely, then, the area will actually have a bigger impact on some of the objectors to this application if this application is refused. Having considered all of the above, council officers recommend within your committee report that you should approve this amendment. Your tree officer's comments state that the hedge and trees proposed will make as robust a screen as possible, and no other specialist consultees have any objection to the change. We therefore ask you that you consider that upholding the limited local objection of this amendment will actually lead to a worse outcome for those objectors and new residents within the development site. We hope instead that you agree with the officers in your committee report, which states that this application is entirely acceptable and that approval should be granted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Andrew.
Can I just take?
Okay, I'll now hand over to the planning officer, which is Katie Roberts. Katie.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing to report in the addendum.
Okay, thank you, Katie. I'll open it to the floor. Councillor Nigel Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose that we accept or approve this application. But I would like to ask officers if they could put a proviso in there, is the fact that I welcome the planting of the trees, which will give some additional screening. But I think I counted a dozen existing trees, of which 5 were dead. And I would like to see them replaced at the same time if we could condition that. I would also ask the applicant to consider moving the gate, which is the access gate to the play area, to the front, to the roadside, as it's quite precarious and slippy on an angle on a damp day to access the playground. But I don't think that needs conditioning. It's just food for thought for the applicant. It'd be better for the neighbourhood. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nigel. Councillor Austin and then Councillor Eagle.
Thank you, Chairman. For once, I agree with the Councillor Nigel Smith and I'm seconding his proposal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eva Lloyd.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr.
Yes, thank you. I've got two issues with this application. The first, it looks as if the land has been raised. It doesn't look as if it's on the correct level originally. So if this would be developed, they would look into some of the bedrooms which surrounds the play area. Also, if I recollect, there was a healthy tree there and now it's dying on its feet. That doesn't happen to a tree like that. I'm asking what's happened in this application. I've tried to contact Matt Hartley to have a conversation about this. That's why I cannot support this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Evo. Okay, Councillor Andrew Wood and then see Councillor Tristram.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted a brief clarification of probably Katie or Carrie or David. If you ask for screening on a property, part of a condition, do you have to make sure that it actually, want a better word, survives and provides that cover which the condition says? And as Councillor Nigel said, there was quite a lot of trees there that are already dead, and looked like there was no issue of maintenance there. So, just from as we're asking this as a condition and a provisor and the planting and of the holly, can you just clarify to me as a new member what would happen if the screening was not successful or didn't successfully take and didn't perform the task that we required? Thank you.
Katie, can you come back, please?
Yeah, so just on that point, just in terms of the existing planting, there is a condition on the original outline application that does require any trees or plants that die within a period of 5 years of being planted are actually replaced. So there is already a condition in place which should protect the existing trees that may not have survived. And equally, in terms of the proposed landscaping, there is a maintenance program that's included within the current application, which would be included within the condition. And again, we would also include a condition to state that if the trees do die within the period of 5 years of being planted, that they are replaced within the next planting season of a similar species. Just so you're aware, just with regards to the current application and the landscaping scheme that's currently proposed, the maintenance schedule does include annual checks for the first 5 years, and if they do find any diseased or dying trees, that they are replaced at the beginning of the next planting season.
Thank you, Chair. That gives reassurance. Thank you.
Thank you. Could just bring in Councillor Tristan Lewis, please, first, and then Councillor Jones.
Diolch. Mae'r
cwestiwn
gan Cynghorydd Andrew.
The question by Councillor Andrew and the response has satisfied me. The question I had not sustainability but maintenance. I was on the site the other day and questions about maintenance, but that has been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tristan. Councillor Jones.
Going back to maintenance, I don't know whether it can be part of the application. The ground of the park, there's a matting where the grass grows through. In a couple of places it's raised, one of which is over a drain, which doesn't look very safe. If that can be corrected, that'd be good.
Okay, thank you. Is that something we can do, Katie? Sorry, you're not a councillor yet, are you?
Again, so there's the maintenance of the play area is controlled actually by the Section 106 agreement. So there is a requirement for that to be maintained in perpetuity. So presumably, if any issues do arise from the condition of the matting, there'd be a requirement upon the management company to either repair or replace that.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Can we note that and make a note to contact the management company with raise Joe's concerns, please? All right, thank you. No more people wishing to speak, so we'll put it to the vote. We've got a proposal from Councillor Nigel, which was seconded by Councillor Austin Roberts, that we go with the officer's recommendation. So we can have a show of hands, please. Those against? None. Any abstentions? None. Okay, thank you. That's Ivo. Ivo, were you against or abstaining?
Abstaining.
Thank you. That one's carried. Okay, the next one on today's agenda is code reference 048886, a rear extension to a dwelling in Bryn Hwlog, 18 Tinnicoid Road, Great Orme, Llandudno. That's pages 49 to 55. We do have a speaker for this application, Mr. Edward Fenner, who will come forward now. Mr. Fenner, you'll have 3 minutes and you'll be advised when there's 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. I've written to the planning department explaining my objections to the major works proposed for Bryn Hwlog, the house adjacent to my own home, Shrigfa Glede. I now feel it would help if I referred again to some of my objections to the intended plans. I think I should refer to 3 of my major objections. 1, the sheer size. 2, the proximity to my property. 3, restriction of natural light. Size. The building would be increased from 2 to 3 stories and would be almost double its original size. In fact, the word extension is an understatement. The size and character of the planned building would be out of place in this narrow road. Proximity. The planned wall facing our kitchen and bathroom would be in direct contact with the present party wall. The new wall would almost be a new party wall, as there'd be no gap between the 2 walls. In future, any maintenance work, for example, painting, repairs, and work on the roof, would have to be carried out from my steps, which are adjacent to the party wall. The workmen would use ladders and sometimes scaffolding, obviously. As these steps are the only access to our back garden, we would be prevented from entering our own back garden on those occasions. This would obviously be a major inconvenience to my wife and myself. The idea of making the extension wall immediately adjacent to the party wall without the neighbours' agreement seems to be against the spirit of the law. I wouldn't be surprised to find that such action would be illegal. If the plans were otherwise acceptable to the planning committee, a remedy to the garden access problem would be a gap of several feet between the party wall and the extension wall, thus allowing space for maintenance, etc. of the new wall without affecting my side of the party wall. This would hopefully prevent damage to the party wall and its foundation too. I could also carry out any maintenance to my side of the party wall and its foundation without fear of damaging the extension wall. Natural light. The sheer size of the new wall, particularly with the extra story, would inevitably reduce the natural light to the kitchen, where my wife and I have all of our meals, and to a lesser extent, it would reduce natural light to the bathroom and to the main bedroom. I know that one of the plans suggests that there would be improved light to our house, but I find this difficult to believe. There is more to natural light than direct sunlight. In conclusion, I would say that the proposed extension would be much too large and would restrict the light to our kitchen and bathroom. And finally, the proximity to the new building would cause a lot of inconvenience to my wife and myself, particularly during maintenance of the new wall. I asked that the committee would at least ensure that the new wall would not be too close to the party wall. This seems fair and okay to me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Farnett.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll just hand over to the planning officer at this point, Mr. Dave Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members that we did have amended plans on the 15th of June, and those were to position the extension inside the stone boundary wall to avoid disturbing the boundary wall itself. And the publicity and consultations with adjoining properties is still ongoing until the 30th of June. So we're recommending approval, but it's subject to consideration of any further representations which we might get from interested people. The application has been with us for many months, so we've already gone through several consultation stages with this application. It's been amended before. This isn't the first amendment. There is also in the addendum an additional representation from a neighbouring property, the speaker who spoke today, which refers to the points that he made when he was speaking. And then just to remind you that our recommendation is minded to grant conditional planning permission, subject to consideration of any further representations that we might get in the consultation period. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Watson. I can see Councillor Ivo Lloyd's hand up. Councillor Ivo.
Yeah, just a question, Dave. The right to light, has anything been submitted in that context, in this case?
The applicant has submitted some drawings, which I think members have, well, they're in the presentation and they were given to the members on the site. We did a site visit on Friday last week. We can show you those drawings if you want to see them. But that one drawing in particular, I think we might as well show them if that's okay. I'll remind myself which one it is. If you look initially at drawing number 1, which shows you where the extension is at the back of the property, and you've got residential properties to either side. And you can see from that drawing that the extension is close up to the more southerly boundary, the southwesterly boundary, and a greater separation to the property to the north. And if you then go down to slide number slide number 17, which I hope members can see. I can stand up if you want me to point anything out to you, but that actually shows an angle from the adjoining property, which is on the right-hand side of the drawing, number 19. It shows an angle from the centre of the window, the lower window. It says kitchen, and there's a line, a diagonal line going upwards to the left, and it says the angle there is 25 degrees above the horizontal at the centre point of the window. And according to BRE, British Research Establishment Guidance, which is what we generally follow with these sorts of things, it says if you have a building in front of a window, if the angle is is not more than 25 degrees, then there shouldn't be a significant effect in terms of light, daylight. And we are talking about daylight rather than sunlight, because this is to the northerly side of those windows. So it wouldn't be a sunlight impact, it would be a daylight impact. So that this drawing shows that the roof of the extension, which has been amended, has now been amended so that it actually has a 25-degree pitch on it, and that enables this to have this 25-degree angle above the horizontal. So on the basis of the amendment, officers consider that the impact on daylight would not be significant to that ground floor kitchen window. Thank you.
For clarification. Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Tristan, and then Councillor Steve.
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd. Yn wyneb...
Thank you, Chairman. As a result of the information we received, the change in application, which moves the proposed building back slightly, am I right and to encourage Mr Fina that those who are applying, they can work on the new building without having access from next door? And I think that would be a peace of mind. The original application went right to the boundary wall, but that is no longer true. So just something to as peace of mind for the applicant.
Okay, can I bring Dave back in on that, please?
The amendment has brought the extension inside the boundary wall, and that's to avoid disturbing that wall. And the wall will be actually detached from the extension, so there's no direct impact. Where the actual boundary falls between the two properties, I don't know. Whether it's the middle of the wall, one side of the wall, whether the wall's entirely on one property or the other, I don't know. But the extension has been amended to avoid disturbing the wall, not to avoid the need to go onto the property to build the extension. That would be, and I don't know what the proposal is for that. It may well be the case that they would need to have access to the adjoining property to build the extension. I don't know. If they do, it's not a planning consideration. It's not something we control under planning. We don't control that. It's entirely up to the properties themselves to resolve that between them. It may be something that the legal officer will comment on. Thank you.
Yeah, on that point, I'll bring in up Gareth.
Yes, to be fair, I'm not sure if I have a lot more to add to what David said, but yes, private rights are not material planning considerations. So there may be redress for the neighbouring land under the Party Wall Act, but that is a complete matter for them to discuss with their neighbours. All you have before you is the development and its effect. That's all you have to consider. You can't consider the effect in terms of Party Wall Act. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, thanks for that, Ryan. Councillor Steve.
Yeah. The size of the extension is quite extensive considering the other houses in the area. Do you feel that extension is in line with the other houses? My other concern is that I recently did a Google search of that area of the Great Orme, and I was quite shocked to see how many Airbnb properties have sprung up in that area. And I'm just wondering how many people currently live in that property, and the potential for that to be converted into an Airbnb, in my opinion, is quite high. So again, how does that affect the affordability of houses in the area? And how does that affect young people who are considering buying in the area?
Dave, can you come back on that, please?
It is undoubtedly a big extension, but it is also at the back of the building. And so we don't have concerns from its visual impact. And it's very screened, you might say, behind the main building. It does have some effect on the adjoining properties each side, and that's what we're assessing. What's the degree of the impact, the daylight, and other things. We'd look at things like windows overlooking loss of privacy, and we haven't talked about those, but we can talk about that if you want. But it's so we don't have concerns in terms of the size of it particularly, because it fits in the space at the back. It takes up it's a terrace garden, and it fills the area where there's an open area at the back that's open at ground floor level, and then it sort of joins to the terrace, and you'd actually get access from the very top of the building onto the terrace at the back. But we don't have concerns about the scale because it's largely screened. In terms of the other points you raised, potential for Airbnb, how many people live in the property, it isn't something that I have definitive information about. And I'm not sure how relevant it is, really. It isn't an affordable dwelling at the moment. It's a market dwelling. It's a general dwelling. So effectively, whatever happens to it, it won't make any difference to affordability because it won't be a loss of an affordable dwelling. it will probably be a more valuable property, but it will have more accommodation. So it will suit a different type of general purpose accommodation for a larger property, for a larger family, you might say. It could, in theory, become Airbnb, possibly, but becoming an Airbnb property, that effectively is the same as saying it would be used for holiday purposes. And you can, there isn't a change of use in planning terms to use a house as a holiday house in itself, not at the moment. There are proposals in Wales to introduce restrictions on things like second homes, which are going through Welsh Government consultation at the moment, but it isn't currently a consideration. And there isn't any planning distinction between a holiday house and an ordinary market house, you might say. So we wouldn't have control over that. And if we were to put a condition on to say it shall not be used for holiday let purposes, I think that would probably be unreasonable as it currently stands, because there isn't any use class distinction. Is that helpful?
Thanks, Dave. I'll just bring in our legal officer, Reynab Gareth.
Yeah, you can't take that into account. I understand why you're asking the question. I completely understand why you're asking the question. However, we need to be careful that we don't take into consideration things that we can't. So you know, I guess that my advice there would be, if you have questions about Airbnb, leave that to another committee. This committee only can deal with material planning considerations. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ren. Councillor Andrew Wood.
Based on listening to the adjacent occupier and all the officer information, and I'd like to propose that, subject to the ongoing consultation period that's there, that this is given the go-ahead.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Nigel, did you want to come in then?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, when I went to the site, I thought, why would somebody want to go to the expense of extending this property? But it is in a most special place. And whilst I listened to the neighbours' concerns, I think it'll benefit the area. It'll raise the value of the properties there, and it'll be something that people may in the future like to do to their properties that may be in the same street, because it will really make a big difference to that property. So I'm more than happy to support this application.
Okay, you're seconding, Councillor Wood. I take it. Yes, thank you. Councillor Eva Lloyd.
Yeah, because it's part of a ribbon development and it's very well mitigated at the back of the property, I also had no problem with this and was going to second it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Evo. Any other members wishing to speak? Okay, right, we have a proposal, Councillor Andrew Wood, which has been seconded by Councillor Nigel Smith, that we go with the officer's recommendation to grant conditional planning permission subject to consideration of any further representations received within the publicity period. So as before, if we can have a show of hands of all those in favour, please. Okay, thank you. And against? Can't see any abstentions? Or 4 abstentions. Thank you. So that's carried. Okay, moving on to 5A, which is code reference 047552. It's a variation of condition number 1, approved plans of planning approval 041334. Demolition of existing buildings and erection of 22 apartments. Approval of matters reserved for subsequent approval under code reference 034855 to substitute approved for as-built plans, apartments 1 to 22 inclusive, Cedar Court, Victoria Park, Colwyn Bay. That's pages 31 to 37 in your packs. I'll bring in the planning officer at this point, which is Mr. Kerry Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing to report in the addendum.
Okay, members, any comments? Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. I propose that we go with the officer's recommendation on this one.
Okay, diolch, Councillor Austin. Councillor Tristan.
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd. Dwi'n eilio
Thank you, Chairman. I second Councillor Austin. Thank you.
Okay, diolch. Okay, members, Councillor Nigel.
Can I ask the officers about the parking provision at the site? How many parking spaces are there, Kerry?
33, I'm advised.
Is that within policy?
The policy in the parking standards SPG, it's not prescriptive. It sets a maximum standard, but there is room for consideration of policy. So essentially, for flats, it depends on the number of bedrooms and the number of visitor spaces. It is important to bear in mind there is no change to the number of flats and there's no change to the number of parking spaces. So the alterations that are before you are to the layout, principally to the access, and some minor changes to the elevational treatment of the buildings.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. Okay, members, can't see anyone else wishing to speak. So we have the proposal from Councillor Austin Roberts and seconded by Councillor Tristan Lewis that we go with the officer's recommendation to approve. Show of hands, please. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, 5D is code reference 049505, continued use of the land as an open air market, the land at Station Road and Seaview Road in Colwyn Bay. Again, I'll hand over to the planning officer, which is Mr. Kerry Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing to report in the addendum.
Councillor Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. Markets for towns are a double-edged sword because retail businesses are struggling throughout the country. When you bring a market into town, you're bringing traders from exterior towns to trade in your town. They don't pay rates like the businesses in the high street. And I'm just mindful of the fact that you know, what they sell on those markets is paramount to how successful the town will be. So my question is, can we stipulate in this application what they sell? So, you know, we want to see really local produce that isn't already being sold or goods that aren't already being sold in that vicinity. Because if you've got a bedding shop and somebody opens up a store, they're not paying rates and they've got it right across the road from your bedding shop and they're selling bedding, they're going to be undercutting you. And that's the problem with markets. So there's a question for you.
In terms of town centre, this is a town centre location where general national policy supports retail activity without distinguishing between different types of retail activity. If you have concerns about the particular types of goods that are being sold, then that would be a matter really for the Economic Development Department to seek to control through licenses rather than through the planning system.
Thanks, Kerry. Councillor Eva Lloyd.
I want to ask, since when has the market been in Colwyn Bay? Is this something that's traditional, or is it only over the recent years? The original applications for the market were made to Colwyn Council before 1996, so the market has existed before then, but I'm not sure when it was actually established. Therefore, in the context, it's been around for a long time. In that case, I'd like to see it continue. There is place for everyone. There's something healthy in competition within business. You can see on the stalls things you may not see in a shops, maybe second-hand records and CDs. that aren't available in shops at the moment. So I would like to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Evo. Councillor Joe Nuttall.
I'd like to second Councillor Eva Lloyd, please.
Okay, thank you, members. Can't see any more hands up, so we'll go to the vote. A show of hands. You've had a proposal from Councillor Eva Lloyd, seconded by Councillor Joe Nuttall. Sorry, Tristan, did you want to come in? No? Okay. Anticipation. That we approve the officer's recommendation. Show of hands, please. Okay, again, that's majority. Against? Abstentions? One abstention, please, Councillor Nigel. Again, I think this is the last one on today's agenda, which is code reference 049541, construction of field shelters to wild horses and fallow deer enclosure. 2 shelters. Sorry, just a delay there while Councillor Joe Nuttall left the room. I was looking down reading, so I missed that. Okay, so it's the construction of field shelters to wild horses and fallow deer enclosure, 2 number of shelters, erection of CCTV masts for monitoring the car park at the Welsh Mountain Zoo, the Old Highway, Colwyn Bay, pages 61 to 66 on your packs, and I will bring in the officer, Mr. Kerry Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing to report in the addendum.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nigel Smith.
I'm happy to propose that we approve this application, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stephen Price.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Councillor Evo, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just happy to support it on welfare issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Evo. Okay, members, can't see anyone else wanting to speak. So again, we'll go to the vote. We have a proposal. It's been seconded. Show of hands, please. Okay, that's unanimous. So thank you, members. So we've approved. On that note, that's the end of our meeting. Thank you all for attending. Interesting discussions, and look forward to seeing you all next time. Thank you.